Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuki. Coming up.
It is really part of the cause these days. We have a lot of distrust in Parliament.
Tonga's Prime Minister faces another motion of no confidence also.
The people here, we're not silly. We know that water is not delivered by magic, and there is a cost to the infrastructure and to the operations involved.
Locals in Rarotonga seek to douse the water tariffs, and later...
The students are very, very keen and are very proud of their heritage.
Aotearoa celebrates the first ever Solomon Islands Language Week. The Tonga government of Huakaveme Liku Siausi Sovaleni is facing a likely motion of no confidence next week. An opposition MP and former cabinet minister, Aisake Eke, is leading the push, claiming he will find the 14 votes he needs in the 26-member parliament. But RNZ Pacific's Tonga correspondent Kalafi Moala is questioning that. He told Don Wiseman the bringing of a vote of no confidence has become the standard move by every opposition, and he doubts it will succeed.
It is really part of the cause these days. We have a lot of distrust in Parliament. And so a group, an opposition group, will definitely come up with a vote of no confidence. The only thing done with this vote of no confidence, the timing is so off. It is destined to fail. And one of the reasons for that, we're at the end of the year. Next year is an election year, and election in Tonga is going to be in November. So if this vote of no confidence succeeds, it means that a new government will need to work on a new budget, which means they'll have to be very engaged in getting the new budget approved before June of next year. And then if it is approved, they only have 2 months to be in government to work on the budget, because Parliament will recess for 3 months before the election. So I don't know how they'll be able to do it. It's kind of very impractical for a new government to come at this time. And there's an election next year. People can show what they want done by next year. So I'm just surprised for the timing of this new vote of no confidence.
Now, I was talking with Aisake Eke yesterday. He tells me there are a lot of very serious issues that they have, and to do with the government spending program. He won't elaborate, though. He says he can't until next Tuesday when they go to Parliament.
Well, an opposition group will always say that there's a lot of serious issues of spending. Definitely, this government has probably more than any government before has done more agreements with donor nations for money coming into Tonga. Even something as like the Pacific Resilience Fund that's going to be based in Tonga with the climate change issue that came out of the Pacific Island Forum. And there are a lot of agreements that this government have done with other nations for different things in Tonga, more than ever before. So because of that, there's definitely the promise. We haven't seen those funds come in, but the promise of millions of dollars that would come in as a result of this government. The other thing, too, is that there are development projects happening in Tonga right now, and it's not necessarily that this was because of the initiatives of this government, but at least they're the ones managing those. Big sports stadium and sports facilities, Tonga High School, the Royal Tomb being renovated. And you see all this development in Nuku'alofa that is happening with this government. So I guess it's kind of an easy target for an opposition group to say, hey, this government is doing so much, and we got these money issues that are coming in, and where is it? So I'm not surprised with that. But let me tell you something that I think we need to face in Tonga. The new guys that are wanting the vote of no confidence, as far as I'm concerned, looking at their history, looking at their record, they'd be worse than these guys. And so the choice is really which are the best of the worst guys to be in government. And definitely this government and their leader has said there are some issues, there are some questions on them, but I cannot think how a new group coming in would perform while this government is doing something better than we've seen before.
The The Cook Islands Prime Minister says most people on Rarotonga understand why a water tariff is needed, but people fighting the tax says it breaks a historic agreement with landowners. The tariffs came into force in October, with the first domestic payment of up to 50,000 litres being covered by the government. Caleb Fotheringham has more.
Of the bare necessities, being cookie irony. Water is God's gift to you and me.
Campaigners fighting the water charge tabled the Keep Our Water Free petition in Parliament in September and gathered more than 3,000 signatures, which is about a fifth of the island nation's resident population. It was the latest petition, with one being previously presented to Parliament in 2014 and 2020. One of the leaders of the campaign, Joanna Finch, says the tariff breaches a historic agreement made last century between landowners and the Crown.
The agreement was pretty simple. The landowners said that the Crown can use their land to catch the water as long as it was reticulated, free of charge to the people.
She says people in Rarotonga are already paying for water through income and other taxes.
The people here, we're not silly. We know that water is not delivered by magic, and there is a cost to the infrastructure and to the operations involved.
Ms Finch says Rarotonga isn't a big island and there is bountiful amounts of water available.
Looking at this island, it is a water engineer's natural dream. We are tropical, we are volcanic, we have lots of mountains, we are water rich. There's no reason for us to pay extra money on top of our general taxation that was promised to cover the reticulation of water.
Rarotonga's Water Authority is charging commercial users $34 New Zealand a month for the first 50,000 litres, while domestic users will be charged $17 a month for the same amount. In a submission presented to Parliament, Terry Carr, Cook Islands Tourism Industry Council President and a landowner, said the people of Rarotonga are already paying for water through taxation. Tariffs as an additional tax on water will only burden our people with more increased cost of living expenses. However, Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown says most people on Rarotonga understand why it's needed.
Most people understand that there is a cost to delivering water to households, and it's fair and appropriate that those who use more should carry a bit more of the cost of that.
He says the more water a business or household uses, the more they pay.
These are modest amounts that we're looking at, but across a large cross-section of customers on Rarotonga, it enables the Water Authority to be able to collect revenues to ensure that it can cover its cost of providing a good, clean water service right across the island.
Ms Finch says Cook Islanders are already economically vulnerable, with more than half of the earning population making less than 20,000 New Zealand dollars a year.
Our petition is simply requesting that the collection, treatment and reticulation of water continues without tariffs or ongoing charges to users, as it has been for the last 100 years.
She says everyone stands to lose with the new charges.
A man with a charismatic name, Emmanuel Chibau, is now the head of the most significant pro-independence party in New Caledonia. Mr. Chibau, the son of Jean-Marie Chibau, is also one of the two New Caledonian representatives in the French legislature. Nick McLellan, who's been covering developments in New Caledonia for Islands Business magazine, spoke to Don Wiseman.
Emmanuel Chibau, already a member of the lower house in Paris, is now leading the oldest and biggest political party in New Caledonia. How significant is this?
It's a major change in that a new generation of political leaders are coming to the fore, not just in Union Caledonienne, which dates back to 1953, its founding, but amongst other political forces in New Caledonia. In part, that's a reflection of the 6 months of crisis that erupted on the 13th of May this year, where you had young people, particularly, many born this century, certainly after the signing of the Noumea Accord in 1998, involved in the protests, the riots, the conflict of the last 6 months. And the election of Emmanuel Chibau is a sign that a younger generation are stepping up. The previous president of Union Caledonienne, the largest pro-independence party in New Caledonia and the leading force within the FLNKS, the umbrella coalition for the independence movement, Daniel Goa, the outgoing president, was aged 71, had a number of health problems, and had been in office, re-elected every year since 2012. Chibao, taking up the position, is 48 years old and joined by a number of other younger leaders in the new executive that will lead the party.
Someone with a conciliatory approach to things, it would seem.
Emmanuel Chibao, for a long time, was a cultural leader rather than a political one. He's never really been a politician. For a number of years, he was director of the Jean-Marie Chibao Cultural Centre, the main arts and cultural complex in the capital Noumea that was named after his father, Jean-Marie Chibao. The older man was a charismatic Kanak leader, a vital force during the 1970s, during the Kanak cultural renaissance, but who went on to transform Union Caledonia towards taking up a pro-independence policy in 1977. But in his work, Emmanuel Chibao, the son at the Cultural Centre, was very much focused on issues of Kanak identity, culture, language. He then went to work in the Northern Province, running as Director of Cultural Services in the Northern Province on the main island of New Caledonia. And it was only earlier this year that he was inveigled into political action, as you mentioned, winning a seat in the French National Assembly in elections held in late June, early July. It's the first time in 38 years that a pro-independence Kanak politician has served in the French legislature in Paris. Major breakthrough. And he won convincingly with 57% of the vote, drawing obviously on support not just from Indigenous Kanak, but from people from other communities.
This is a seat, of course, that had previously elected a fervent anti-independent candidate.
Yeah, Nicholas Metzdorf was the previous holder of the seat in the northern part of the main island of New Caledonia up until this year's elections. Metzdorf is a partisan of France, wants New Caledonia to stay within the French Republic. He co-founded a party called Génération Nouvelle Calédonie, but is a leading spokesman of the Loyalist Bloc, which is the more conservative anti-independence parties in New Caledonia's Congress. He comes from a Caldoche family. The Caldoche is a name used for long-term residents, people born over many generations of European heritage. It was interesting, though, that Emmanuel Chibao took on that seat and Metzdorf switched to the capital Noumea. So he won the seat in July in the French National Assembly, but covering the capital, where there are many anti-independence voters. Chibao ran with his alternate, a young Caldoche woman, Amandine Darras. Once again, an important generational shift. Darras is in her early 30s, a leading environmental activist, very involved in questions of environment, reef protection and so on, a feminist. And to have both a young Kanak leader and a woman of European heritage running is really significant. And indeed, Darras has now taken up a position as Deputy Secretary General of Union Caledonienne at last week's Congress, alongside Chibao. So there is a significant symbolic as well as practical role to have these younger people stepping into leadership at a crucial time as New Caledonia moves towards negotiations on its future political status.
There's a rift within the pro-independence movement, isn't there? Do you think he'll be able to pull them all together?
I think Chibao has a background and a personal manner that will be able to talk with a range of parties, both partners on the independence side and also the anti-independence parties that will be involved in these talks about finding a replacement for the Noumea Accord, the agreement that's governed New Caledonia for the last quarter of a century. There have been significant debates within the independence movement, particularly around two parties, the Party of Kanak Liberation, Palika, and UPM, both of which have suspended their operations in the FLNKS, the umbrella body. Palika and UPM have been critical of the violence and conflict over the last 6 months, particularly critical of decisions taken at a Congress, FLNKS Congress in August, that opened up the four-party coalition to many other smaller groups, including the Parti Travailliste, the Labour Party, DUS, a Southern Province pro-independence group, and others. I think Chibao has the character and the connections to bring people together. It's a name that resonates. Jean-Marie Chibao, who was assassinated in 1989, was very much a charismatic figure, an iconic figure. The Cultural Centre is named after him. There's a statue of him shaking hands with Jacques Lafleur, the late leader of the anti-independence side. The Chibao name has a lot of mana, has a lot of standing in New Caledonia. And I think Emmanuel Chibao, he's got a very difficult job because Union Caledonienne has its own internal debates A couple of key leaders have been pushed aside in the elections held last weekend, and he will have to work to mobilise his own supporters to rebuild the relationship with Palika and UPM within the FLNKS, and to then prepare for complex negotiations about the way forward. But he's been very clear. He said in an interview after his election that the pathway towards full sovereignty for New Caledonia remains Union Caledonian policy. He also, though, talked about the need for economic reforms, given the enormous economic chaos that's come from 6 months of conflict that's seen significant damage to industries like tourism and mining that are the mainstay of the economy.
It's Solomon Islands Pidgin Language Week, celebrated for the first time in Aotearoa. The theme is Protect Our Language and Culture. Glorious Marie Oxenham, Secretary of the Wellington Solomon Islands community, says there are different languages in the Solomon Islands, with Pidgin being the most spoken. Mrs. Oxenham has lived in Aotearoa for over 41 years and was awarded a Queen's Service Medal for her advocacy in the Melanesian community. One project she is particularly proud of is teaching Pidgin to New Zealand-born Solomon Islands children. She spoke with Grace Viva'ai.
My name is Glorious Marie Oxenham. I'm known as Glow, or Auntie Glow to a lot of people here in Wellington. I've been in New Zealand for over 40 years. I came here in 1981, Boxing Day. So Boxing Day is always my anniversary here in New Zealand. I've been living in the Wairarapa for a number of years before moving down to Wellington. So been in Wellington area for over 15 years now. So,
Glow, what is Pidgin English in the Solomon Islands?
It is in the Solomons. Pidgin English is English based, so a lot of English words and local dialects are all mixed in together. So it's easy to learn, I guess, for people because it's English, but it's not. So words like, for example, you how means like how are you. People find it quite fascinating, and they always easy to pick up. Similar to Bislama, which is spoken in Vanuatu, and Tokpisi in Papua New Guinea.
Now, you're teaching Pidgin to children here in Aotearoa, especially in Wellington. How important is it for those children to learn the language?
Only this year we started doing the language lessons for little children, but also the whole community. So a lot of children in our community, they're from families from the Solomons. Their children are born here, and they don't speak Pidgin. They may hear their parents speak it, but we've had 2 sessions so far. Just said, and the students are very, very keen and are very proud of their heritage, and they love to learn Pidgin.
How do you feel as a Solomon Islander here in New Zealand, celebrating Solomon Islands Pidgin language here for the first time?
I'm very, very proud to be a part of this language week. And our theme for this year is protecting language and culture belonging to me. I think one of the things that came up when ideas were first lodged about including Melanesian countries into the New Zealand language weeks was which language would we use? And there were questions about, are our languages actually dying? Whereas for the Solomons, I think one of the things that people must realize is that languages in our own countries are still very much being used by people. Pidgin English is a lingua franca. Other than that, people speak 3 or 4 languages of their own, or there are many languages, but people use Pidgin to be able to communicate. People are just starting to realize back in the Solomon is that they must teach their children the languages of the family, of where they come from. So not just to speak Pidgin.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.